Hi, everybody. Welcome to Modern Email Security Unleashed. We're going to give it 2 more minutes to let people sign on and then get started, so hang tight. Be right back. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon and good morning, and welcome to the EdgeWave webcast, Modern Email Security Unleashed. Super glad you guys could all make it today, and look forward to a discussion around email security and best practices and some of the new solutions that are being developed to help you better protect your organization. So I want to cover off on a couple things before we get started. First, this is a broadcast-only session. You're all probably familiar with the model. We do encourage you submitting questions via the GoToWebinar question field. So as things come up, please submit them. And what we will do at the end of the broadcast is try to pick off a few of those questions. If we can't get to all of them, we will follow back up with you individually. So don't worry. And we're obviously all here to help answer your questions as we go forward. Also, after the session, we're going to send you a link to this recording so you can reference this as needed. And if you have any questions on that, that should probably come within the next 24 hours or so. So hoping all the audio visual is good here, and please chat with us if any issues, but we're going to jump right in. So my name is Tom Beck. I'm the VP of Marketing at EdgeWave. And real quickly, EdgeWave is very deeply focused on email security, specifically on targeted threats that get past traditional gateways as well. We began in this space by developing email security gateways, which is why we have a lot of history in the space and have a really interesting perspective on what's going on in the market space today. We've worked with thousands of companies over the past few years to help secure their inboxes, and we've recently developed several new solutions that we're going to talk about towards the end of this session today. And who is going to lead that discussion is my friend and colleague, John Randall here, VP of Product Management. John, maybe spend a second and talk about your background.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And as Tom mentioned, good morning, good afternoon to everyone. So I've got 25 years experience in the security space, and for all of those years, I've been involved in email security at some level or another. I've spent time doing internal IT and implementing many email security solutions. I've spent time working at the vendor level, as a professional services consultant, implementing it for customers. So definitely I've seen a lot over the last 25 years and really excited to be here at EdgeWave and some of the new ideas and technologies that we're developing and how we can help you secure your inboxes.
Right. So you've been the IT guy on the other side of the fence, right, as well as the solution delivery person.
Yeah, no, absolutely been the IT guy. I've worn that hat. I've had users submit emails to me and ask me, is this good or bad? And I've done the training that many organizations are using today, instructing them if you're not sure who the email came from, don't open it. If there's an attachment you're not sure, don't open it. So I've been preaching those messages for many, many years and seeing the pros and cons of all of that. But yeah, I've been on your side of the table for a number of years and definitely have a lot of experience from that side as well.
All right, we'll dig in on that for sure. So one of the first things, I think a lot of you on the call today have seen many, many stats regarding phishing, targeted phishing, social engineered attacks, those types of things. Still some of the major statistics that we want to surface today before we get into the discussion. Over 90% of malware is still delivered by email. I mean, we see so many reports talking about email is still the issue. I saw a study the other day that talked about hackers today would, on a factor of 3 to 1, would rather go after people and the human error factor rather than technical vulnerabilities within companies, right? So we know that email is really the vector of attack preferred by choice by most either phishers or hackers. And interestingly enough, an average user gets roughly 16 malicious emails a month based on, again, a number of different surveys. This is just one of them. And if you extrapolate that out, John, right, that's, times 12 months, right, that's almost 200 malicious emails. You've got 500 or 1,000 users in your company. You're talking about 100,000 plus, malicious emails over the course of a year. That's a lot to have to deal with, right? And I'm not even sure if anybody realizes the depth of the tip of the iceberg nature of this, right?
Yeah, and I think the thing to put into focus there is these are messages that are making it to the inbox. So they're getting past an existing pre-delivery solution like the gateways that we've had for years. And these are the ones that somehow have been identified. So we really don't know the full scope of this. The number could be 2-3 times that users aren't activating or aren't submitting that are going by the wayside. So yeah, I think the point here is that email is still the predominant form of business communication. It's not going anywhere. I remember years ago there was talk, is email going to go away as social media and texting become more prevalent? And the reality is the opposite. We're sending and receiving more emails than ever, which is why the criminals are using it and they're finding ways to get through. So the problem of bad email is not going away. It's probably only going to get worse. And the question you have to ask yourself is, how do we deal with the messages that make it to a user's inbox?
Yeah, and I think what's really cool is you've gone back to our own threat detection center analysts, right? And really had a discussion with them about what are some of the latest types of new attacks that we're seeing. So instead of running through a bunch of generalized, phishing is really bad statistics, let's talk about what our own analysts are seeing lately and the kinds of things that are fresh approaches for these bad actors.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do meet with our threat detection analysts a couple times a week just to hear what's going on. And every week is slightly different, as you can imagine. And we see things which can be variants of things we've seen before. We also see things that are net new. But what's really interesting is we're seeing a lot of increase in the cross-vector attacks, which the other things that are listed here kind of fall into that. And so when I look at this and I hear the threat analysts talk about this, that if a message comes through, it might point to a website, for example, of a well-known financial institution, a well-known shopping site. But what they've done as part of that is they've added fully functioning pages to that make it appear as though you're truly entering, for example, your PayPal information to enter your credit card to pay for it, but it's all malicious. But the user is faked into thinking that they're on a real, valid, legitimate shopping site.
Deeper, better digital forgery.
It's much deeper, much better. But it is starting with that email. We talk about cross-site scripting, which organizations have thought of for years as a web vulnerability, which it is. But the phishers, the criminals, are taking advantage of that by using an email to send them to a link to a legitimate website that has been compromised. We saw an example of this of a major financial institution. Their EMEA site was nowhere near as secure as their US site. So again, very legitimate email, socially engineered, looked like it came from this financial institution, pointed at customers saying you have questionable content or questionable transactions, click here. EMEA website compromised using cross-site scripting. So part of that cross-vector attack scenarios that we're seeing more of. But I think, again, putting on my director of IT hat, this goes back to the security kill chain. The emails are being used to initiate the compromise, but there is so much additional activity going on beyond that throughout the entire kill chain that you stop the kill chain at any point, you stop the attack, why not stop it at the very beginning? Things like abuse of Azure. We're seeing more and more content being hosted in public sites like Azure or Microsoft sites or Google Drive, that the emails are just pointing to that. So the emails are the tip of the spear. They're the beginning of the kill chain, and then they're utilizing these other pieces as well. So it's important to realize that if you can get ahead of this, it's common sense you would think, but if you can get ahead of this, you can stop all these new attacks from from even taking effect if you can stop it at the inbox level or at the email level.
Right. As we look at our threat detection center and kind of how we're aggregating these and reporting on them, this is based on, thousands of different customers, right? And what we're seeing across those customers, which is really much different than what a single IT person or team might see within a single organization, right? We're exposed to more.
Absolutely, absolutely right, Tom. When I talk to the Threat Detection Center, we review content and analysis that's performed each week. I see some interesting statistics. Probably the most interesting one right now is that over 30% of the messages that we see are deemed malicious. Wow. So these are messages that have reached the user's inbox. They have been submitted to us for review, and they are flat out malicious. So we got to pass, every gateway is out there, and we're well aware of that. And then as we talk about the tactics that are being used, our analysts are able to say that even though the content of a message may not have much in it, we get lots of samples which have absolutely zero links, zero attachment, they're just text, but we've seen enough across all of our customers that we can say this is suspicious because we've seen this before, the "are you at your desk" type emails. There's nothing about the email that is suspicious or malicious unless you have that visibility that you mentioned, Tom, where we've seen it from 1,000 different customers. We can then look at it and say, this is something that should be treated differently. And our analysts will go through and see what happens if you do respond. But it's a level of intelligence that's hard for any single organization to collect.
Yeah, and I want to circle back and talk about those analysts and kind of what we go through on that side too, comparatively here in a few slides. So obviously we get that damages are getting bigger, and without creating, too much FUD conversation here are just some of the recent things. And healthcare is being pummeled right now. We know that. So Unity Point had almost 1.5 million patients' identity information that was compromised. The FBI is talking about billions lost in the last 30 months, and everybody's coming out with new stats on the monetary damages connected to this. Facebook, Google, $100 million to a Lithuanian hacker due to a phishing scam. And again, these are leveraging some of the techniques John's just talked about. Recently, I want to say it was, 6+ weeks ago or so, we had 2,700 bank domains that were compromised and attacked, via the start of a phishing attack. So I can't stress to everybody enough, even if you're talking about small, mid-level enterprises, right? Folks are being broached and breached at all levels of business. So the fact that you might only have 100 users doesn't mean you are vulnerable. As a matter of fact, we're talking to customers on a daily basis, that smaller businesses are regarded as less sophisticated and therefore more apt to fall for a spoof. So everybody's got to think about this equally.
Yeah, I think there's a couple other spins you can put on this. There are lots of big numbers out there, as Tom mentioned, and if you check the media, something new will come up tomorrow. We highlighted a couple of different verticals here. We've seen a lot of cases where municipalities have been breached lately, all the way back to Atlanta a few months ago. So wait a couple of days, there'll be a new vertical, there'll be a new breach. For me, the important thing here is to realize, as Tom said, everybody's a target. There's ways that you can be a target without even realizing it. And you might ask yourself, why would I be a target? And it's simply because you exist, which is scary in and of itself. But part of the issue you have to realize that it may not be that you are targeted because they're going to steal your money.
That's a pretty deep philosophical statement. So you're a target simply because you exist.
Because of the techniques that are available today, you can target anyone, whether you even know that they exist or not. You're just on the internet.
I know. I just don't want to feel so hopeless, John. But let's continue.
But you have to ask yourself, what is my true risk and what is the cost to my organization? And many customers that I've talked to have not even gone through that exercise. So these are big numbers, 5.3 billion, scary number. But you have to understand what is your true risk and what is the cost to your organization. If you are breached by one of the techniques that I just talked about, and the loss to your organization is 100,000, 100 million, or a billion, whatever that number is, how material to your organization is that, and how are you going to change that so that if you are breached, that number is lower?
Yeah, not everybody can afford to go open a crypto bank account, right, to pay off these guys. It's real money to some people.
Absolutely.
So, now, I'm going to give you your platform to talk about traditional email security here in a second, right, which I know that we do a lot. I mean, we are an email security gateway company. We've been doing that for years. So we see firsthand what we do well against versus what we don't, what the industry does well against what we don't. Let's talk about that a little bit more specifically, right?
So yeah, email gateways have been around for over 20 years, and they have evolved over that 20 years as best as they can. And they're still extremely valuable in protecting your organization because you are subjected to, hundreds to thousands to millions of messages a day. And so you want to be able to throw that into the top of the funnel, if you will, and be able to start classify them and remove the obvious things pretty quickly. And so from the very early days, your email gateways have been pretty good at these spam, the basic spam, the Nigerian prince campaigns, which, believe it or not, even though according to the media they caught them, we still see those come through. But these mid to high volume campaigns are the ones that we have been very, very good at with our gateways, and you need to continue to be good at those just so they don't make it further. But as you work your way down the funnel, what happens is the gateways have gotten better. They've added spoofing techniques, DMARC and DKIM, for example, being very powerful. Domain fuzzing, where you can look at a domain and it says, it looks like Microsoft, it smells like Microsoft, but it's not really Microsoft. Further funnels down the capabilities of your email gateway. But what happens is you still have this last little bit at the bottom of the funnel, like you do with anything, that the gateway just can't quite deal with. And this is why you're getting, per the previous slide, 16 malicious messages per user in their inbox every month. The gateway's great at what they do, but they can't handle everything, especially the very targeted. There's simply not enough content for the gateway to say, this is suspicious, I need to pick it up. Or if you bounce over to those, are you at your desk emails that we're seeing variants of, how's the gateway supposed to know if that's good or bad? So that's the reality, is your gateways are good, they top of the funnel, the mid of the funnel, they keep pushing things down, they keep adding new pieces to get better at this, but there's always going to be a section that they miss.
So, and super quick on this, before we go to the next slide, are Office 365 users kind of in that same position as what we're talking about here, as they rely on the security embedded in O365?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Microsoft purchased an email security company many years ago, and they've integrated that within their hosted exchange, part of their Office 365 packages. And it's good at what it was designed to do, which is those mid to high level spam campaigns. They are adding more to it to drive that funnel down, as you would expect, and so they will continue to do that. It's worth it for them to do that. It makes sense, but it will never be as good as you would hope, because there's always going to be these targeted ones. So whether you're using within Office 365 or a third party, there's always going to be just something that gets through, because that's what the criminals are trying to do.
So, I decided not to put this in as a poll question. It's more of a rhetorical thing. How much do you out there, IT pros, InfoSec pros, trust users to determine whether an email is malicious or not? And we'll talk about this a little bit more in a second, but based on several studies, one I saw on Engage Employee very recently, 3 out of 4 IT pros are not confident in end user security awareness. And that is the ability for these end users, right, so multitasking, so distracted by so many things, to be able to evaluate and even make a judgment, right, regardless of security awareness training, because we talk to people every day that are doing SAE or security awareness training of some kind, phishing simulation of some kind, yet not necessarily seeing the needle move as much as it needs to offer true protection, correct?
Yeah, we've been doing training of end users for years. Again, if I put my ex-director of IT hat on, we did this way back when. And there's value, because you will always get a segment of users who will adopt whatever you're preaching. But there's too many of the users who just are too busy, too distracted, that blurring of work versus personal, your personal device. I've got lots of things going on, lots of ways to communicate. It gets hard for people to stop for a second and say, okay, let me hover over a link. Let me understand a little bit, is that email address it purports to come from really my CEO, who, by the way, has never ever emailed me, but now he is for some strange reason. There's just so much going on, and there's only so much that a typical human, not even just a typical end user human, can adjust to and react to. And that's what SAE is trying to do, is train new actions, and it's challenging for the users to remember where and when.
Yeah, human nature, curiosity, carelessness, distractedness, those are tough things to gen out, right? So even with security awareness education, users only reported 70% of phishing campaigns based on the Verizon DBIR. Does that number sound about right to you? As we talk to customers and whatnot, because I know we're talking to customers that have this deployed and are looking for additive layers, right? So does that feel about right?
Yeah, the 17%, I don't have a problem with the number, and I know Verizon does a lot of great research in their breach investigation, so I can definitely live with that number. I think This is a case where, again, internally, every organization needs to evaluate. If you're doing SAE, you've made the decision that that's how you want to start addressing the post-delivery challenge. That's wonderful, but how do you define efficacy, and how do you demonstrate the effectiveness of this? If you have to go to a senior level executive and they say, how are we doing with that? How are you able to prove that? And I think that becomes the challenge for a lot of organizations is, yeah, we make our users go through this training every month, every quarter, every year, whatever the frequency is. But then what? How do we know that it's absolutely working? And there's lots of statistics out here that are showing us that it's not working as well as many organizations would think, and yet they continue to do it.
And so the then what is a really good segue, because at this point, I mean, we want to talk about modern email security. What does modern email security look like? And there are a couple different points of view on it, right? And we see how people are doing it now with a gateway, with security awareness training, all these things. You know, what we always hear from the CXOs, right? The CTOs, the CIOs, the CEOs, you know, catching phishing emails, that's what my IT guys are supposed to do. And I can't tell you how many times as the marketing person here at EdgeWave, I hear that from the sales team, right? I mean, how do we combat that? And the challenge right now for IT, you know, is that if you use a gateway, you use SAE, guess who the funnel goes to, right? It's going to the IT professionals within the organizations. And we realize that IT teams are really overburdened right now and somewhat underfunded, right? We've seen a lot of different, you know, reports and statistics around millions of IT pros needed worldwide to fill the gap, right? In the United States alone, the most recent one I saw from the journal was, you know, 500,000 more pros needed just in the United States alone in organizations. I don't even think that included state and local government. I think that was just private organizations. That IT as well is not trained on a daily basis for email threat analysis. You know, John just outlined some of the things that our threat detection center expert analysts review on a daily, hourly basis, 24/7. And while we get that there are great IT pros out there that look at these and investigate, analyze, and remediate, it's tough to make that a full-time job. It's just not for them, right? And then lastly, you know, gosh, almost 90% of small to mid-sized enterprises are currently underfunding key cybersecurity initiatives. And we see email security almost lost in that blitz as well, because there's something new or sexier coming down the pike, right? And good old email security, well, I got that kind of handled. And the reality is we don't, right? So, you know.
yeah, a couple of quick comments on that. I was actually earlier this morning talking to one of our partners about a variety of different things, but they made a very interesting comment that ties in directly here, which is email security is not sexy. And so we have 500,000 open IT jobs here in the United States alone, but people entering this field are not entering it to become email security specialists. It's not sexy with all the other things going on here. So that's, you know, not train a daily email threat analysis, 100% true. They're not coming into this field. And yeah, email security as a whole has been underfunded. It's been a good enough solution, especially the move to Office 365. There's lots of value in doing that. And again, what Microsoft's offering is powerful, but everybody kind of moves on to the next sexy thing, if you will, and email security doesn't fall into that. And so when I talk to our threat analysis, we're talking about campaigns that are coming through, and we're talking about classifying them. You know, they talk to me about all the different things that they see, and I remind them that that's the value that an analyst like that should provide to an organization. Is that should be their only job, because they can then make that context connection of, are you at your desk, came to one customer, are you in the office, came to another customer. So they've changed a couple of words, but it's effectively the same campaign. And one of the examples we saw was 2 or 3 emails later, when the customer actually did click and respond, we played the customer for them. It led to a situation where the criminal was asking for the recipient to purchase gift cards, and for a customer that he was sitting at that he couldn't respond to voicemail, so email me only, which led to a couple more email exchanges, which then led to, hey, just scratch off the information at the back and send me the code so I can use them. This all started with an "are you at your desk," which warped into a "are you in the office?" That's the value that having somebody dedicated to you can provide here, is they can see those instances which are similar, they can see the context, they understand the research that's necessary to understand what happens at the end of that. Those are all the pieces that are missing for internal teams today. So they're not entering the field, they're not entering email security, they're not doing it full time. How do you get that full level context?
Right. So let's now talk about kind of our point of view around this. as well as small to mid-sized enterprises, I just want to stress the fact that maybe the largest organizations have that kind of built-in infrastructure and whatnot, but the small to mid-sized enterprises don't, right? So
yeah, absolutely. The absolute largest ones will have that.
Right.
But most organizations can't afford to spend the money on that.
Right. So as we talk about modern email security unleashed, we really want to talk today about is really this concept of an automated post-delivery and incident response anti-phishing solution. And John has worked with our team for some time now as far as developing this concept of post-delivery and incident response. So we want to outline that for everybody on the call today and why we believe this is an important set of elements and components for the best possible email security posture you can have as an organization. So as we look at this, John just talked about the value of pre-delivery protection, right? That's the gateway. It does the broad, campaign and spam filtering. It uses mail reputation and filtering rule sets. There are policies driven by it, even maybe some machine learning that's being incorporated into this type of a thing, right? But as we talk about net new in this, let's dive into post-delivery.
Yeah, so everybody has pre-delivery today. Even as Tom mentioned, what's built into Office 365 absolutely falls into that category. And it's still extremely valuable. You need to have that today just to deal with the bulk if you're looking at the funnel again. What post-delivery detection says is, okay, messages will get passed, and there's ample evidence of that in every organization. So what do you do then? Because now you're dealing with messages that have reached the user's inbox. So who's going to have access to those? And an email administrator could get access to them, but that requires a full-time level of searching and scanning and being able to deal with that level of volume, where if you go back to the end user and say, let's help them figure this out and activate them in a more fashionable way, if you will, you have something you can work with there. So post-delivery is what happens once a message reaches the inbox. The end user has access to it. What do you want them to do there? And what we're proposing is that we need to activate the user in a way that doesn't give them an either or, say, this is what you do with it.
Yeah, the user isn't making decisions based on training. It's literally abdicating and giving the decision responsibility to somebody else, right? On noticing anything. And then beyond that,
you have incident response, which is, okay, we've done the post-delivery analysis, and many organizations do this today, but they've done the analysis and they said, yes, this was a malicious email. Thank you, Mr. End User, for sending that to me. We'll take it from here. Well, the from here part is now what do you do with it? And you can tell the user to delete it from the inbox, and there may be ways you can do that in an exchange-type office environment. But the real question is, are they the only user that received that message? So you can delete the one instance, you can deal with the one incident, but in many cases, that same email has gone to other people. So how do you deal with that? How do you scan your entire mail store, find all the instances of that, and automatically remove it before some other overworked, distracted, multitasking user says, hey, that looks like a good, tasty, clickable link. Let me click on that and see what happens. That's what incident response is all about. So how do you deal with those? How do you clean them up before anything bad happens?
You use the term defense in depth. I've heard you use it as kind of a parallel for other types of security, right? Is this what we're talking about when we talk about defense in depth?
Yeah, entirely. So defense in depth for years has been, you had a firewall, you had your web security solution, you had your email security solution, you have things at the desktop, you have all these different pieces, you could put IDS, IPS in. You had a lot of different things that you could put in, but each one of them covered a different angle, and email security was one of those layers that we had in a defense in depth approach. What's apparent now is when you look at the pre-delivery solutions that we have today, again, they've done very good at what they were designed to do, but they're not providing 100% protection. So you need something that works from the inbox on down. So what we're proposing here is that you now have a defense in depth strategy at the email security layer in your much broader defense in depth for your entire organization.
So let's talk about that specifically based on the solution that you and your team have engineered, right? That we call threat test, but it really speaks to this whole concept of post-delivery detection.
Yeah, so what threat test does is when a message reaches the inbox and a user looks at it and says, I don't know, is this good or bad? I remember the SA training and but I just don't know. What we're telling the user is you don't have to know. If there's any level of suspicion, if you just want to double check and make sure, simply send it to EdgeWave for analysis via an Outlook plugin. So it's a very simple, highlight the message, click the plugin. The message is removed from the user's inbox and placed in quarantine until the classification is done. We notify the user, thanks, we've received your submission. We'll let you know what we find out of it in a few minutes. Most of our analysis takes less than 5 minutes, but for some more intense ones, we've seen 10, 15 minutes, but most of them are less than 5. The message goes to EdgeWave, we do our analysis. Once we classify it, we then send a response back to the submitter saying, thanks, we took a look at this email and it's basically green, yellow, or red. If it's red, it's malicious. We found something absolutely that we don't want you to deal with, so we've left it in quarantine based on your administrator policy. If it's green or yellow, again, you get a notification, same thing, and depending on your administrative policy, they define what happens with it. But you're getting this feedback loop. You're not having to decide. You're not having to wonder. You're being told, we have it. 5, 10 minutes later, you get a response. This is what we found with it, and this is what we did with it. So we're using our analysts quickly respond, who are reviewing these thousands of messages a day from thousands of customers to give you real-time information on what that message is.
And so typically now, for most companies, if they've got a user that has some concern or whatnot, what happens now without something like this?
Yeah, it's not uncommon that they would submit it to the internal IT team. And I remember we're talking to a customer of ours that the people who do that, they're commuting like many of us do in the world today. And so during that commute time, for example, whether it's the morning or the evening, simply no way for any of those people to actually do the analysis. So a user could submit an email, and it could be multiple hours before they potentially get a response back. Do they have the time to wait? Do they have the patience to wait? It's still sitting there in their inbox. There's just lots of things that can happen. So that concept of dwell time, where the message is sitting in a user's inbox waiting for somebody from the IT team to have the time to take a look, is a major challenge in that scenario.
So this bypasses really, this is kind of the pseudo IT investigation analysis remediation cycle that an IT team might do, right? Or be burdened with if the flow is pretty heavy at the time.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're doing everything that they would have done if the IT person had time, albeit with our own analysts, but in a much quicker fashion.
Right. Let's talk, you just brought up the concept of dwell time, which I think is really important from a standpoint of across an organization, a larger organization, all the possible vulnerabilities created by letting something sit, even if one person recognizes it, but the other does and don't, right? So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, if you look at any of the big security reports that come out from the industry, and the Verizon one is a good example of that, they talk about the time between a breach and detection of the breach. And that's a version of dwell time. And while we want that to be lower as much as possible, in some cases you're finding that it's still weeks to months of dwell time where the criminals have had full unfettered access to the network for that period of time. So what we're trying to say here is incident response is about reducing the dwell time. And if many messages, if you look at them through the cybersecurity kill chain, are starting with an email, a phishing email, let's kill the dwell time as quickly as possible at that level. So that's what we're saying here is users don't have to decide good or bad, they simply have to submit. Within minutes, we are going to give them a classification, and with incident response, we can automatically scan the entire mail store and eliminate other versions of that, all without IT involvement, all without waiting for the IT team to have time. IT team is notified, this all shows up in our UI, so they're all aware of it, but it all happens invisibly, if you will, in the background.
Yeah, we provide reporting enough for them to have the level of visibility that they want.
Yeah, they can see what we did and who we affected it with.
Okay. So I know this is something that, we recently put together as far as defining the email security landscape, and down the left-hand side, we see the 3 components that we talk about for modern email security. And we try to do, in an anonymous fashion, right? And there are more than certainly 4 vendors in this space, but I think these characterize the types of vendors that we're seeing, right, out there and what they do. What is this telling us right here?
Yeah, a very common question that I have when talking to customers or prospects is, I have an email security solution in place today, so I have pre-delivery. Why do I need post-delivery and IR? And when we talk about what's going on at the post-delivery and IR phase, and illustrate to them through this type of table that your existing pre-delivery vendors aren't doing much, if anything at all, in those particular areas, and everybody admits that phishing messages are getting past their pre-delivery solution, we're just trying to illustrate that there is a challenge, which I think we have plenty of stats that every organization is using, and your existing pre-delivery vendor is very unlikely to be doing much about that, or if they are, they've kind of dipped their toes into the water. Right. So if you need help, which we posit that you do, if you're looking for your pre-delivery vendor to come to the rescue of that, what we're finding is they're just not doing it yet.
Okay, pretty straightforward. You know, one of the things that I like to try to do is just simplify the takeaways. So we've had a chance now to talk about some of the pains. Again, everybody on the call is on the call because they see and feel some part of this pain, right? We've talked about some of the new threats and our POV around what modern email security looks like. If we look at the contrast of this, so email security now in an oversimplified fashion, that's how my mind works. I'm a marketing guy, right? So I got to keep it simple. You know, email gateway plus SAE equals kind of good enough what a lot of people are doing now, right? Layering SAE on top of the gateway with simulated phishing attacks to create greater awareness and hopefully enlisting everybody in the company around the security mantra, you know, for email users. If we look at our point of view, you know, it's really around this concept of the email gateway, really good to have, and that combined with security awareness training is also good, right? But adding post-delivery detection, so that's inbox monitoring detection, a facile way to find it and remediate it quickly, and then the incident response really clears the whole organization of that threat, right? In an immediate standpoint with less dwell time equals a best-in-class approach to email security.
Yeah, absolutely. And email security as a whole, the email security now portion of this slide, is really what the market has gone to, which is the good enough mentality. Let's get back to email security if not sexy. Despite all the media attention around phishing, thank you WannaCry from last year making a big information about ransomware and how it can be delivered via phishing. Everybody knows it, but they're still looking for the shiny new toy of where else I can go to spend my money. And what we're positioning is that, again, email security new is the gateway which you have today, as well as post-delivery detection and incident response, which are very minimal additions to what you already have today, which are removing the human element from having to decide. We're simply telling them to send it to deal with it. This gives you the best in class, so you can still look for the shiny new silver bullet somewhere else in your infrastructure, but we're getting your email security beyond good enough to best in class, as you stated here.
Right. So key takeaways here before we get to a couple questions. Number one, you know, pre and post delivery is really essential, I think, to getting, you know, and pre and post delivery, those are terms and words that are industry standard terms and words, although we don't hear that a lot yet, right? The pre and post delivery, but that's something that's been bandied about for some time.
Yeah, post delivery has come up in the last couple of years, and when you talk with customers about the differences, they get it intrinsically, they understand.
Yeah.
Pre is before the inbox, post is after.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're becoming more common.
Okay. Machine learning and expert human review. So we've baked that's at the core of kind of our point of view around this, right? As we talked about having this routed to our teams. Just spend 1 minute on kind of our machine and our automated process versus our human analyst, expert analyst process on how we look at an email when it comes in.
Yeah, every message that sends into our threat detection center goes through a number of automated checks. We're looking to see if we can quickly classify it against known spam, known campaigns that we learned from our gateway. But more importantly is all that information that we glean through the automatic checking is then passed on to the analyst. So when the threat detection analyst is actually looking at the message in the console, it's color-coded immediately, say, hey, here's all the different pieces that we've seen. This is what we know about each piece, so that they have the content, they have the awareness of the different pieces, and what we're asking the analyst to do is to apply that context to each one, saying A plus B plus C does equal malicious. Thank you, machine learning, for making that easy for me to understand. So yeah, of the messages that we see, probably 20-25% of them are immediately flagged based on our existing machine learning rule, but the rest of them do go to an analyst, but all that information is shown visually to the analyst so they can make that quick determination, which is where we get our 5-minute turn time.
Okay, cool. You know, automated incident response is essential to protecting the entire organization, and this goes from the one to the many, which John talked about, I think, which is really important. So ultimately, I think what we're saying and what John's team is trying to convey is this concept of don't let users have to make judgment calls. I mean, training is a good thing, awareness is a good thing, but putting them in a position in their distracted state, multitasking, overworked state, don't make them have to make a call, right? I mean, make somebody else that's focused on it make a call, which is super important. And, you know, lastly, save your IT staff, you know, the time and the costly overhead of having to deal with these emails. I mean, if you're out like everybody else in the world trying to digitally transform your business, you need all the IT cycles you can get, right? You don't need people, you off in the basement trying to remediate these emails. So I think that's our message around how to unleash some of these new solution sets to help you get better protection post-delivery, better protection and incident response across the organization. I know we're bumping up against some time here. I certainly want to invite anybody to, go to edgewave.com/request-a-demo. Again, I'm the marketing guy, I got to say this. You can send me a note directly as well as if you have any questions. We've already had a couple questions on, are you going to send a recorded copy? Yes, we are going to send a recorded copy. And in a couple minutes, I just want to go over a couple questions because I got a bunch of them here. So John, currently we have an email gateway. Can your post-delivery and IR solutions integrate with that gateway, right? With any of those gateways?
Yeah, and actually the answer is yes, but the answer really is yes because there's no integration because we're operating at different levels. So your gateway is addressing messages as they come in and then making a determination, do I deliver them or not? What our incident response and post-delivery are doing is interacting at the mailbox level, which is beyond the gateway. So there's no changes to your gateway. In fact, there's no integration. It continues to do what it does so well today. We're simply looking at things once they've reached the inbox.
Parallel question, does it work with Office 365?
Exact same answer, yeah.
Same answer.
Yep, same answer.
Yep. As far as, handling emails with no links or attachments, I mean, you mentioned that as a scenario. That doesn't really matter to how we approach things as well, right? Because they're all still analyzed through the machine and the human experts.
No, absolutely. And we are seeing an increase in the types of messages that are coming through that don't have attachments or links. But that's where having our analysts do this as a full-time job, a full-time living, gives them that visibility and that context that is hard for any single organization. So when an email comes through and says, are you at your desk? Could be extremely benign, could truly be from your CFO. But because we've seen those and analyzed those and seen where they can go, it gives us a different view on them. And we can denote them as risky because we've seen versions of those that go off and be bad in the past. We can denote those as malicious because the exact one comes in with the exact same information other than a different recipient, and we know exactly what happened. So that's just a different level of visibility. But every email that gets to an analyst goes through the full analysis from top to bottom to understand what's happening.
I'm just going to take one more here, and I know we're not going to talk about pricing specifically, but what's the model here? Subscription model, one-time cost. I mean, how does this kind of work within the business context?
Yeah, it's a yearly per user per year subscription. Okay. Similar to most email security solutions are today.
Okay. All right. Can you explain how those emails work in terms of no links or attachments, in terms of how they infect a system?
So those specific emails themselves do not. What we've seen in some of those is it takes 2 or 3 exchanges with the sender to trigger something. So really that first message is a very proverbial bobber in the water to see who's going to start nibbling on that. And it actually takes a couple of examples or exchanges back and forth. What we're finding is that in many cases they're leading to things like the gift card scenario that I explained earlier, which is an interesting approach, but if you find enough people who do that, where all of a sudden you've got $1,000 or $2,000 worth of gift card information, you're off and running. So the email itself is not going to infect your system, but that's the thing to keep in mind with the cross-vector attacks we're talking about, is that the email itself is just the entry point. Where it can go from there is really interesting, and that's the scary part of it. There's just so many different places. So it can be there's never a link. It can be there's never an attachment. The gift card example never had any of that. It ended up with just send me the codes from the gift card.
It's a response with some PII or whatever it might be.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. All right, I appreciate your time, John. Thank you so much for the conversation. I'm sure we will continue this, right?
Absolutely.
And everybody on the call, thanks again for attending. We'll have another one of these very soon. John talked specifically about municipalities and what we're seeing in terms of how heavily they're being attacked right now. So it's very probable we'll be coming up with another discussion around municipalities in particular and several other verticals that we're seeing a lot of heat around this. And we'll detail that out. More to come in the future. So there are other questions. We'll follow up with you on that. We'll be sending you guys a recorded version of this. Thanks again for your time, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye, everybody.